Good day, everyone, and thank you for tuning in from whichever part of the world you're joining us from today. Welcome to our official New York Climate Week event titled Shop Floor to Boardroom, Short Film Festival on Skills for a Greener World. I'm Steffi Oligal, Program Communications Manager at WRI India. It's my privilege to be your host for today. In the next 1 hour, we will shine a spotlight on skills and innovation by bringing to you 5 short films that showcase stories of aspiration, resilience, and change. We will also be sharing insights from WRI's report titled Elephant in the Boardroom, and we have an esteemed list of panelists who will talk about green skills for a more inclusive workforce. This event has been made possible by and supported by Aries Charitable Foundation's Climate Resilient Employees for a Sustainable Tomorrow, which is the CREST initiative. With that, let's move on to our most anticipated segment, which is the Short Film Festival. And before each of these videos that we show, we have a special recorded message for all of you. Can we play the videos, please?
Energy transitions are ultimately about enhancing people's lives, and doing this through jobs and enhanced economic opportunities is key, while also protecting workers and communities that may be negatively affected. IEA analysis shows that energy jobs are growing faster than in the wider economy, and accelerated transitions can create millions of additional jobs in all regions and at all skill levels. This creates opportunities not just to provide good quality jobs and careers, but also to ensure that these opportunities flow to those who need them the most. For this to happen, governments and other actors need to act now to anticipate the upcoming changes, plan for skills needs, plan for opportunities and change that is coming, and put the goal of bringing benefits to those who need them the most at the heart of good policy design. In that way, these policies can deliver not just their energy and climate goals, but also at the same time increase participation of women in the energy sector, target jobs for workers and communities in most need, and maximize the social and economic gains that clean energy policies can offer. You're going to see that in this video, where women are benefiting from progressive policies to create employment, benefiting them and their families and their communities in a real win-win that shows us that we need to learn from good practice stories, build on their success, and replicate those lessons so that we can make sure that when we talk about people-centered clean energy transitions, that's what we deliver. Thank you.
In MFI, we have nearly 20% of the employees, are women here. We hired them, we have trained them, we have made them skilled. Even though they have physical challenges, we have put an additional number of employees to bear the services,
Management asked me to take women employees for as a part of this production. So that time actually I opposed. So because I don't know whether they can work with us. If we give the exposure and the training to them, so they can easily understand, and also they can manage everything. The production and productivity will not affect with the women. So right now I'm very comfortable with working with women.
ஆரம்பத்துலங்க சார் எனக்கு எது தெரியாதுங்க, யாருக்கிட்ட எப்படி பேசுகிறேங்கிறது தெரியாது. பேசுவாங்க, கொஞ்சம் பயந்துட்டு தான் பேசுவேன். இப்போ கொஞ்சம் தைரியமாக இருக்கிற மாதிரி தெரியுதுங்க சார் இங்கே வந்ததுக்கப்புறம்.
சேலரி வாங்கி என்ன பண்ணுறேன், எங்கள் அப்பாவுக்கு கொஞ்சம் கொடுத்தேன் நான். ஏன்னா அப்பாவுக்கு கொடுக்குறது நமக்கு ஒரு சந்தோஷம் தானே. அப்பாவுக்கு கொடுத்தேன், என் ஹஸ்பண்டுக்கு ஷர்ட் வாங்கி கொடுத்தேன். அந்த மாதிரி சின்ன சின்ன பிள்ளைங்களுக்கு அந்த மாதிரி சின்ன சின்ன விஷயங்களுக்கு தான் செலவு பண்ணேன்.
So changing this culture will help her not only in terms of our family, there will be a societal changes as well. In this way, we can create a difference in the society. Yes, women is capable of doing in the automobile industry.
அடுத்து என்ன பண்ணணும்னு நினைக்கிறேன்னா, பிள்ளைங்க 2 பேரும் நல்லா படிக்க வைக்கணும். அப்புறம் நானும் இன்னும் இதே வேலை கண்டினியூ பண்ணால் தான் பிள்ளைங்களை படிக்க வைக்க முடியும். அவங்களுக்கு ஒரு லைஃப், நல்ல ஒரு லைஃப்பை என்னால் தேடி கொடுக்கணும் அப்படிங்கிறத என்னோட ஒரு அச்சீவ்.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you at Climate Week in New York. At the India Climate Collaborative, our work is centered on building an ecosystem where climate solutions reduce emissions while also protecting people and livelihoods. The textile sector is a telling example. It is one of the most resource intensive and polluting industries globally, and yet it sustains millions of workers, many of them women. The transition to a more sustainable set of technologies offers enormous environmental benefits: reduced water use, lower emissions, less waste. But these changes also carry risks if not managed equitably. Jobs can be disrupted and communities can be left behind. That is why we believe sustainability and inclusion must advance together. Climate action should mean protecting livelihoods even as we decarbonize, upskilling workers while transforming industries, and ensuring communities are strengthened rather than sidelined. The video you're about to see captures this balance. It tells the story of an enterprise in central India that adopted cleaner technologies while keeping people at the heart of the transition. Workers were trained, supported, and empowered, and climate action became not just a story of emissions reduction, but of dignity and opportunity. For us, this is the promise of India's climate journey: solutions that are ambitious, innovative, and above all, human-centered. Because in the end, the fight against climate change will not be won by technology alone. It will be won when people and planet move forward together. Thank you.
Textile sector is one of the key MSME sectors in India. There would be millions of MSMEs, particularly micro industries, which are involved within textile sector at different part of the supply chain.
There is a huge potential of textile industry for growth, particularly in export segment, but at the same time it is also polluting heavily, both in air emission as well as water pollution. We have installed recently in dyeing house, there is a machine which is called continuous tumbler dryer. So we saved almost around 1 million liter in a month. We reduced almost 23 kilo of GHG per hour. Now in this machine, there are only 2 to 3 persons who can operate this machine. So the 8 to 10 people who are already working, we accommodated them in different other areas, like in finishing area, in drying area.
पहले पुराने CPL में काम कर रहे थे, छोटे डंबल में, और फैब्रिक भी वेस्टेज जाता था, पानी वेस्टेज जाता था, मैन पावर भी ज़्यादा लग रहे हैं, मैन पावर को भी प्रॉब्लम आ रही है, कपड़े सुलझाने में गरम गरम कपड़े हाथ में छाले टाइप से आ जाते थे, प्रॉब्लम होती थी। अभी नई मशीन आ जाने पे वो सब प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व हो गई। नई मशीन आने पे वहाँ से जैसे मैन पावर कम हुए तो हमको जैसे दूसरे मशीन में शिफ्ट किए तो उसमें हमको नई टेक्नोलॉजी सीखने को मिल रही।
If you want to grow, if you want to retain in the system, in the supply chain, or maybe in the business, you need to be, always take this kind of initiatives.
In normal any economic transition, people always get affected. But the point is that if we are trying to move towards a sustainable future, it's very much possible to overcome these challenges, not only to transit to the cleaner future, but also transit in a just manner.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Sharon Burrow. I'm a 30-year Labor leader, both nationally in Australia and internationally, with deep relationships into India. The global labour movement led the campaign for just transitions to the Paris Climate Agreement. And this film today gives you another part of the puzzle about how we create the transition to indeed electrification, to a net zero world. But it also gives you amazing advice about how we must look to the rules and the regulations that manage e-waste, but also create strong and inclusive jobs. We all know that we need to shift to a renewable future. Electrification is no longer just an option. But with that comes all sorts of e-waste, from renewable energy, from electric vehicles, from those heat pumps, whatever the technical contribution is to this future. We know that it's also leading to a rise in e-waste generation. and many workers involved in the dismantling and the recycling of e-waste sadly are in informal or insecure work. They face very unsafe conditions, low wages, often indeed poverty wages, and limited or no social protection. We can do better than that. Managing e-waste responsibly is not only an environmental necessity, but it's also an opportunity to create secure, decent, and inclusive green jobs. This short-titled film, Value in Waste, explores the challenges of the growing e-waste issue. It's set in India, but indeed, while it highlights the informal nature of the work, and as I've said, the safety risks, the challenges that workers face for dignified, inclusive jobs in this value chain, it's not only a guide for India, it's also a guide for every country in the world. We need to manage the circular economy. We need to see that the jobs that are creative are good jobs, decent work, so that we can be assured that the transitions will be just wherever they are. I thank the producers because as a member of the WRI board, this is an incredibly valuable contribution to thinking through the economies of the future. Thank you.
E-waste globally, it is one of the fastest growing waste stream. So, primarily if you look at e-waste regulatory framework in India, it came in 2011-12 with the EPR as a broad framework. In 2022, we see addition of solar panels,
which are now coming into the waste stream, and they will grow exponentially because we are using a lot more of them. So there is a lot of that solar waste that will be needing treatment.
About 80 to 90% of e-waste was recycled in the informal sector in India.
Where the problem starts in the informal sector is that they are not capacitated, they don't have the technology, they don't have the tools, they don't have the right space to really handle those products in the safest way possible.
हाथ को काजी भी लगता है और ये पसीना छूटता है तो घबराहट भी होती है, ये बहुत मेहनत का काम है.
We are focusing specifically on really creating that interface between the informal sector and the formal sector.
We are giving them a solution in terms of space and infrastructure where they can bring their own e-waste and dismantle it using our tools and equipments in a safer, in a more hygienic environment.
But I think a larger bit is to look at electronic waste as a circular economy concept and bring in repair, reuse, upgrade as a major principle.
मैं अपने घर वालों को भी कह के आता हूँ जी ऐसे ऐसे कंपनी में काम कर रहा हूँ, तो उन्हें भी ऐसा लगता है कि हाँ बढ़िया जगह काम कर रहा है, और फिर देखने में, सुनने में या करने में फर्क भी लगता है.
Hi, I'm Madhav Pai. I'm the CEO of WRI India. At WRI India, we've been working very closely with the textile MSMEs in Surat, and one of the issues pertaining to climate change that they are trying to deal with is the increasing heat and humidity that their workers are facing. I think we are all becoming more attuned to the extreme heat challenges, caused by climate change that our workers in gig workers, construction crews, farmers are getting exposed to. But for example, even in indoor workers, in textile MSMEs, spend long hours working in these hot, humid spaces. Temperatures regularly breach 40 degrees centigrade. What do we need to address their concerns? How do we, improve their working environments as temperatures rise? This is what you will see in this video.
every summer it is getting harder to work. But for many in India's textile MSMEs, it is not just the heat outside that they need to battle. Surat, the textile hub of India, is close to the Tapi River and the Arabian Sea. Between March and June, temperatures in Surat can soar as high as 44 degrees Celsius.
सुबह से आते हैं, जैसे हम लोग का कहते हैं प्रोग्राम लिया, इसके बाद काम करने लगे तो सुबह ही से हम लोग का पैंट शर्ट जैसे काम कर रहा हूँ तो पसीना बहेगा, पसीना चलेगा तो कपड़ा भीगेगा ही.
High humidity can make it feel much hotter. At 70% humidity, even 36 degrees can feel like 54 degrees. Heat-intensive machines in textile units can run as hot as 200 degrees Celsius. These machines use steam and hot water, which adds to the humidity. Heat trapped due to poor ventilation forms hot spots, worsening the conditions. Prolonged exposure to these conditions can cause fatigue, dizziness, and dehydration.
काम कर रहे थे, काम करते तो उसकी इतना गर्मी लगा कि चक्कर आ गया.
With temperatures expected to rise due to climate change, addressing these issues are crucial for worker safety and productivity. In Surat, efforts are being made. Some units have introduced cooling systems, leading to noticeable differences in workers' well-being and productivity.
पहले बहुत ज़्यादा गर्म था, पर जब से कूलर बैठा, हम लोग का हवा लगता है तो थोड़ा रात मिला, थोड़ा कपड़ा उड़ा सूख जाता है.
But these efforts need to go much further.
मशीन के ऊपर इंसुलेशन करने से जो खाते के अंदर गर्मी रहेगी वो कम रहेगी, क्योंकि मशीन की गर्मी मशीन में ही रहेगी, न कि बाहर आएगी. दूसरा, जो भी हमारी बिल्डिंग है उसका प्रॉपर एयर वेंटिलेशन होना चाहिए ताकि उसकी गर्मी बाहर निकल सके, ठंडी हवा अंदर आ सके और कारीगरों को राहत मिले.
By creating safer workplaces that protect workers' health, MSMEs can stay productive, competitive, and resilient.
Climate change and the energy transition are not distant challenges. They are restructuring labor markets and upending how we live and work right now. This transformation is happening in three distinct but interconnected ways. First, climate change is altering existing livelihoods. Second, the energy transition from fossil to renewable energy will directly affect hundreds and thousands of workers. Third, the transition will have ripple effects far beyond the energy sector itself. As countries shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy, coal miners, oil rig workers, and power plant operators will all need to find alternatives. At the same time, we need trained workers for the renewable energy sector. Other forces like technological change driven by artificial intelligence and automation, as well as trade shocks, are simultaneously pressuring labor markets. Workers and businesses are facing the perfect storm of disruption. How do we move from just recognizing the problem to solving it? From our vantage point, however small that may be, the Just Jobs Network is seeing what works on the ground. We've mapped the specific skills needed to effectively manage water commons in rural India. We have also analyzed how the shift to electric vehicles demands fundamental changes in skills. We've studied how the availability of these skills is already determining where EV production locates and how this affects livelihoods, both of those that can participate in the EV sector and those that are being left behind because of changing skill requirements. Finally, while working at policy level, helping governments reform their skills training architecture to meet the needs of this rapidly changing economic landscape, we must make these urgent investments in education and skills systems, fundamentally transforming them to develop human capacities that meet the needs of this tumultuous modern economy and world. The video you're about to see depicts the challenge of this transition from a woman's perspective and centers how transformational skills development can be at this juncture. Thank you.
இப்போ ஹவுஸ் கீப்பிங்லேருந்து இது மாறினதுக்கு காரணங்க சார், இதில் போனால் கொஞ்சம் நல்லா தெரிஞ்சுக்கலாம், என்னென்ன வேலை செய்கிறதுங்கிறது தெரிஞ்சுக்கலாம். அதுக்கப்புறம் நான் மேடத்துக்கிட்ட கேட்டேங்க சார், மேம் எனக்கு இந்த வேலை பிடிச்சிருக்குங்க, நான் அது செய்யட்டுங்களான்னு. சரிங்கம்மா செய்யுங்க அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டாங்க. அது எப்படி செய்கிறது என்னங்கிறது தெரியாதுங்க. இப்போ வந்து இந்த மேக்னெட்டு அசம்பிளிக்கு வந்ததுக்கப்புறம் அது புது வேலை தானுங்க. அதனால் பார்த்து கொஞ்சம் கொஞ்சம் பொறுமையாக இது பண்ணி இப்போ நல்லாவே ஈஸியாக இருக்குங்க. ஆரம்பத்தில் ரொம்ப பயமாக தான் இருந்துச்சுங்க, கைங்கால் கூட கிடுக்கிடுக்குன்னு அப்படியே ஆடுங்க. இப்போ பழகிடுச்சு.
Hi, thank you everyone, and I hope you enjoyed these videos as much as we enjoyed putting them together for you. I want to give a special shout out to the enterprise owners and workers featured in these videos for trusting us to bring these stories to life, and for that we're deeply grateful. We now turn to Elliot Metzger, Director of Sustainable Business and Innovation at World Resources Institute. He will share his findings from WRI's report, Elephant in the Boardroom, People Are Missing in Corporate Supply Chains. Over to you, Elliot.
Thank you, Steffi. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Elliot. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. My Wi-Fi is a little slow today, so apologies if I have any delay, but thank you for putting this on. Thank you for going through all the technical difficulties and coming out on the other side. This isn't easy. These transitions aren't easy. I think one thing we really all need to have is some understanding of what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes. And that's why I find these videos so powerful. Just really, I've been at WRI for, getting close to 20 years now. And these are my favorite videos. They really, they stick with you, and hearing someone speak about their experience in their own words, I just find that so powerful. So thanks for putting these together. Thanks for putting them on. And as Steffi said, big thank you to those who shared their stories and were brave enough, courageous enough to sort of explain how they're feeling the transition. And it's something that really I think we all need to keep with us. So I wanted to share a little bit of WRI research about the connections to the big companies. So WRI for years, for as long as I've been there, has worked with these large companies on big challenging issues, measuring greenhouse gas emissions, mapping forest cover, mapping water resources, et cetera. One thing that I think we've missed is, okay, well, if we have that information, you have the greenhouse gas inventory, and you want to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, what does that mean for people in your supply chain? I think if you talk to any big company, they'll say, hey, we can reduce our own emissions by this much, but our real opportunity is with our suppliers. I don't think anyone's really fully gotten a handle on what that means. There's the measurement part, there's the sort of accounting part, but then there is that people aspect and the training and the knowledge and the skills and those things that come with that. So we did a little bit of research, and if I can share my screen, I'm going to test Teams one more time. I'm going to share what I hope is, somewhat as powerful, maybe not as compelling as the videos, but I would like to share just a little bit of the research. It's a paper we just published. It's called The Elephant in the Boardroom, People Are Missing in Corporate Supply Chain Goals. So essentially what we did was we took the 500, 600 largest companies, say, and we looked at their supply chain goals. We filtered it down to those that are sort of relevant, and the recent goals that we can sort of find in publicly available databases. And we looked to see, okay, how many of those are people-centered? How many of those are partnership-focused? And this is what we found. Hopefully everyone can see this. This is a a basic summary. I like to call it the quilt graphic, but this is a summary of what we saw in those 1,000 or so supply chain goals. Not surprising, a lot of it's on sourcing and compliance. Their suppliers following the rules and their code of conduct and things like that. A lot on clean energy, renewable purchasing, greenhouse gas emissions. A fair amount on philanthropy, sort of donating to education, hospitals, schools. A lot on packaging, water, waste. But the blue, I want to focus on the blue. Those are the things that I think a lot of companies are missing. And if you talk to them, privately, I think a lot of companies will admit, hey, there's a big transition happening in our supply chain that we can't see. We can't, reach a lot of our tier 2 or tier 3 suppliers. And I think this is reflective here. Like there's a lot of opportunity in the reskilling, entrepreneurship, gender diversity, worker well-being, some of these conditions in these micro, small, medium enterprises. Obviously, a lot of room for improvement there. How do you connect these big companies with these big ambitions, science-based targets, things like that? How do you connect them with the people in their supply chain that are going to have to make those changes to reach those goals? And more importantly, what's in it for them? I think that's a big disconnect too, because if a company reaches its goal, great, fantastic, good for them. Maybe, some investors and others will be congratulating them, but what about the workers? If they reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, what's in it for them? More contracts, that's good, that's helpful, but better conditions, better economic opportunities, things like that. How do we connect those dots? Not easy. Again, this is not something we suggest is going to be simple, but we do have a call to action. I'll end with that. There's really 3 simple questions we're asking the big companies to think about. One is who. Who in their supply chain, couple orders away from their tier 1 suppliers, who's affected by this? Where are the pain points in their supply chain? It's often going to be at that micro, small, medium enterprise level. What's in it for them? Get to understand them. The best stories we heard from companies like Mars and IKEA and others, they spent time asking that question. What do their suppliers or their suppliers actually care about? What's important to them? Livelihood, supporting their families, things like that. And then finally, where can we invest so that there's a payback for our company, but also a payback for our suppliers? Where are those opportunities where we can share the value? And who are the right partners? It's going to be unexpected partners, different types of investors, philanthropic capital, things like that. So very grateful to have a chance to share some of this, encourage others to take a look at the paper. We can put the link in the chat. And big thank you to the WRI India team for putting this together, and to the folks at the Aries Charitable Foundation and the CREST Initiative for making all this possible. I'll leave there. Hand it back to you, Steffi.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elliot, for sharing the findings. With that, we move on to our panel discussion, and it is my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panel. Aditi Jha is Board Director and Country Head of Legal and Country Government Affairs at LinkedIn India. John Harper, the CEO of FSG. Meena Naik is a Senior Director in the Education Practice at Jobs for the Future. Arpit Sharma, CEO of Skill Council for Green Jobs. And moderating this discussion is Ashwini Hingne, Associate Program Director at WRI India. Ashwini, over to you.
Thank you, Steffi, and thank you so much to all our panelists for joining us today from different parts of the world. And thank you so much to our audience for being so patient with some of the technical glitches. But I will not give a lot of context. I think the videos and Elliot's presentation really gave us a gist of where we are today. In terms of the conversation on people-centered transition, on empowering people in this transition. But I'll just say that this New York Climate Week, while I'm here, the biggest shift that I am seeing is the conversations that people are having, panels are having, and how people are now central to every discussion, how skills, jobs, and economic mobility is central to every discussion. And therefore, today is really coming at a very time. So without much ado, I will now start with Aditi, a question to you. What shift have you been seeing in the data that you have been looking at? And how should countries navigate this transition? And particularly, what's the role of the private sector?
Thank you.
So for a couple of years, LinkedIn has been looking at its data set and has been publishing what we call the Global Green Skills Report. And if you look at the last edition of the report in 2024, what we're seeing is that demand is rising for green skills, for workers that have green skills, while the supply is falling fast behind. So in just 1 year, if you look at last year, 23 to 24, the demand for green skills grew almost twice as fast as the supply. So there was 11.6% growth in job postings on LinkedIn for workers who have green skills, whereas there was only 5% growth in talent. We estimate that by 2050, this gap between green talent supply and demand will balloon to about 100% if the current trend continues. So unless we double the size of the green talent pool projected to exist, we will put sustainability goals at risk. Because whatever sustainability goals we have, 2045, 2070, net zero, all of that, we need people to work to make those goals possible. The other interesting thing that we've seen on LinkedIn data is that workers with green skills are about 55% more likely to be hired than average, which shows that these are very valuable skills in the current labor market. So even from a supply perspective, it's important that that workers adopt these green skills, which makes them much more employable, and it makes their employment sort of economic recession proof or less immune to economic cycles. If you look specifically at India, I think it's fascinating. We've seen a 140% increase in share of auto workers with EV-related skills in between, say, 2018 and 2023. About 6% of India's auto workforce possesses at least one EV skill. Now, this is a little below, say, Sweden, Germany, and UK, which are in the ballpark of 8 to 9%. But India's pace of growth indicates that it is a rising green workforce hub right now. If you look at fossil fuels, where we can see a huge transition in progress there as well. The share of workers in renewable energy is growing by about 6% versus just 3% in fossil fuels, so indicating a stronger momentum for clean energy employment even in the fossil fuel sector. Interestingly, what we're seeing is that when we traditionally think of green skills and green jobs, we think of the traditional sectors such as EV, solar, hydrogen, etc. What we're seeing is that it's looking like in the future, most jobs are going to be green jobs. We're seeing a demand for green skills as well as workers taking on green skills in sectors that we've not traditionally thought of as green. For instance, in the tech sector as well. We've seen in 2024, skills like sustainability reporting, energy efficiency have grown by about anywhere between 56 to 70%. We're seeing growth of green skills both in demand and supply in things as diverse as, say, architecture, landscape, restaurant business, chefs, etc. Besides that, we're definitely seeing an inclusion challenge as well. Only 10% of women globally list a green skill compared to about 20% of men. Women have a faster rate of growth. I think the rate of growth for women who have green skills is growing by 12% versus 8% of men, but that progress is still 3 times too slow to have equity. Since we are sort of still at the ground floor or the first floor when it comes to green skills and green jobs, I think this is a great opportunity for the ecosystem to come together to ensure that we can close the gender gap. From a takeaway perspective, I think that integrating skilling into climate policy is essential. So when we talk about climate policy, NDCs, all of that, embedding green skilling targets and treating workers as central to this transition is important. So that's where governments come in. For the business, I think businesses have to start thinking of green skills as well as reskilling and upskilling. When I talk of reskilling and upskilling, I think if you're going to wait for a whole generation of people to come through school, college, apprenticeship with green skills, I think it'll be too late to meet our targets. So we have to think of the current workforce, see what skills are transferable, and upskill them on where the gaps are. And as we're doing this, both policymakers, governments, we need to be mindful of being more inclusive, having more women, and focusing on the Gen Z and the early in career workers as well. I'm going to stop now, but that's sort of a snapshot of what we're seeing.
Thanks. That's very. As you started speaking of some of the strategies on how do we take this on, I'll move to Mr. Arpit Sharma, who's been really tackling this problem, opportunity, in fact, from the forefront green skills and green jobs. So, Mr. Sharma, if you could throw some light on what kind of innovations in skilling, curriculum design, or delivery frameworks have you been sort of testing, and what has worked in India? And also, particularly, how can public-private partnerships really enable this transition of skills and of jobs? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank the team WRI for inviting me here for the panel discussion. Well, that's a great question that, what kind of practical and job-ready green skills, they come fastest when the curriculum and delivery both are built around the real workplace tasks. And there's an employer involvement, and there are modular credentials, and there's hands-on practice. And we have been often using digital tools to scale up our quality of trainings. So I'd like to summarize that the most effective innovations that SCGJ has done and how they work and why they work, and there has been a quick implementation tips that can be actually given to the audiences right away. So the first thing I would like to mention is that it should be the industry-led competency frameworks plus the employers. They have to be engaged in co-designing the entire curriculum. So whenever there is a curriculum that is designed, from a job task analysis, so we generally do it with the employers. And when industry itself helps define the competencies and assessments, the candidates generally match the employer needs, and which leads to rising in hiring. And this approach is recommended by the international TVET leaders. Like one of the examples is when I had personally gone to visit the German TVET approach, and I'd spent around 10 days there. That's how we tried to align the same thing in India, and this has really speeded up the placement and made the assessments very meaningful to the employers. The second thing I would like to highlight is the structured apprenticeships and very short workplace placements that actually alternate on the job and classroom learning produce measurable employability gains. So even ILO report, shows an evidence that modern and flexible apprentices are amongst the most scalable ways to build up practical skills. Then we have in the Indian vocational education ecosystem, we have the concept of creating micro credentials and modular stackable learning. So very short focused micro credentials for very specific green tasks. For example, PV array commissioning or EV battery safety, or maybe for a green hydrogen domain, a desalination unit technician. These kind of short focused credentials enable rapid upskilling of the existing workforce. And recent studies also document improvements in employability and personalization. So I would also like to add, that blended delivery with the virtual labs and digital twins is one of the very efficient methods. Like we as SCGJ, we compete in the World Skills event every 2 years, and 2026 it's going to be held in China, and the last World Skills competition was held in Lyon, France, where SCGJ bought a bronze medal in renewable energy. So we also have water technology as one of the trades. So what we combine the online theory with short hands-on labs, including AR and VR virtual labs or digital twins. Of course, they're costly, but it gives learners a repeated and very safe, low cost practice. And universities and national labs report strong improvements in hands-on readiness when virtual labs supplement the real practice. So these are some of the examples that SCGJ has taken up to improve the curriculum design, as well as improving the quality rate of the trainings, as well as the rate of placements in the industry. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sharma. Maybe Meena, I can move on to you and maybe hear from your experience in the United States, where you've been working with multiple stakeholders, states, and actors trying to design skilling programs. And perhaps my question to you may be a step further to say, how do you really translate some of these innovative pilots and short-term programs into long-term systems? And also, how do these systems keep up with the evolving technology and emerging needs as they change over time? Thanks.
No, thanks so much. Thank you, team, for having me here. I think, actually building on what has already been shared, which is really powerful. It's coming down to being agile. That's what's maintaining and supporting the development and continued opportunity of moving into the sustained growth that we're talking about here. And so within the United States context, we've been seeing a lot more of actually one of the big things that was already said, which is that more and more jobs are becoming green. And as we're talking about moving from these pilots, which were previously, and I think even now as they're being innovated, one-off training programs. Hey, there is a need in this region. In California, we need to grow our EV production. And so we develop very specific in partnership with our local partners in employer, public-private partnerships, training pathways for those communities. The problem is that as those jobs get filled, the roles, the technology that's in them is not static. And that's sort of the case that's being made. And that change is happening more rapidly now than even 2 years ago. And so when these pilots are starting to turn into something more stable, a big part of it is actually moving away from this is a program specifically for this green skill and moving it more into this idea that our regional demand in this state, in this particular context, is to grow this kind of jobs. It's not that we need to grow our EV production. It's that we need to be able to grow this sustainable manufacturing pipeline that in this case is for electric vehicles or electric vehicle batteries. And the skill set then has to be engaged and embedded across the education pipeline. And so now it's not this one-off program, it's built in through policy and incentives and investments into the local training pipeline. It becomes something that is driven by a coalition, by what we have here as chambers of commerce and other groups that bring employers together, that are going in and saying, if our education pipelines, our sustained state-led, community-led education pipelines start to build this up, we will see the changes we're talking about. On the side, as these skills become more ubiquitous, and we see them more and more, where it's less now about, right, that electric battery manufacturing and more about this is just what our manufacturing pipeline looks like, those skills actually have to embed even further. So what is right now very specialized and would be a micro-credential and would be very targeted has to become something that exists across more and more programs and gets into our K-12 and primary education pipeline. We have to start building those skills as something that everyone has, because as more and more jobs become green, and we're no longer seeing them in sectors that we would consider green, so wind energy, this battery-powered work, solar panels, and so on, and we're seeing the skills themselves go into power reduction in tech. We need to see those skills get more and more embedded, be it about data analysis and things like that. And so that's the transition that we see happen. What it takes to get there, though, shared definitions. What does it mean to be green, but also what does it simply mean to be changing with technology and time? When we embarked on CREST as partners, WRI and Jobs for the Future, big effort was around how do we start to understand what a green job is? How do we start to train people into quality jobs where they have sustainability, living wages, mobility, advancement opportunities, and so on? And what we're seeing now is it's not about green jobs, it's simply that jobs are changing because emerging technology is making us more, it's forcing us to be more sustainable. And so knowing that that's where we are, a lot of this is about helping to demonstrate the competitive advantage to our businesses, to our employers, to our partners, that this is not a pilot program to meet a niche job demand effort. This is not something that's going to be one and done. This is a competitive business advantage that in order to stay sustainable and relevant in our changing economy and time, because emerging technology is changing the way we do business, which thankfully means that it is also changing us to be more sustainable as more jobs become green. These skills need to be expanded into more and more jobs, into corporate upskilling programs, into our education pipelines, incentivized for workers so that they understand that they're more marketable. It will help them get jobs more quickly or help them earn better wages because of the skill that they gain. And then the policy that says, now this is just how we operate. That when we go into a region that relies on a fully electrified public transport system, the skills that are needed for all of the maintenance technicians in the entire state look different than they did when it was diesel powered. And so a lot of that is then layered into policy, practice change, employer driven efforts with that demand, and then finally into that supply pipeline in a way that no one knows anything has changed. And that happens through this effort and continued coalition partnership that we see. To the agility piece, then, we're simply responding to technology changes. We're no longer trying to change something because it is for social good, which it is, but our argument is it is a business imperative. And so these skills are core, they're unique, they have to be added in because together with the rest of the skills I have, they make me more marketable. And that's what we're seeing across a lot of our programs, that the ones that are able to sustain in our changing policy climate, in changing investment climates, are the ones where this is a unique effort. It's something that is actually helping us be more resilient as employers, as drivers of our economies, as part of our supply chains and the effort that we're leading as well.
Thank you so much. On something that's going to be, and final question to John. So John, bringing you in, given that you've been working with businesses across geographies and philanthropies across geographies, what do you think are the key incentives that can really make employers want to invest in skills? I think Meena touched upon profitability and competitiveness, but we do see a lot of resistance from employers in really investing in workers upskilling. And a related question to that would be, how do small businesses really get access to skilling, especially in some of the technologies and sectors where they might want to build their capacity? So over to you, John, and hearing from you. Thanks.
Thanks so much for this opportunity, Ashwini. Thanks to everyone at WRI. And it's, I think, a pleasure to be able to hear some of the similarities between the work of what's happening in the US, the focus on apprenticeships and micro-credentialing. It's a very similar conversation, of course, different contexts, but a very similar conversation. So I appreciate some of the corollaries that play out across. I think Meena actually took many of my points that I would name about what really creates these incentives. It's at the core of what is the actual competitive advantage that is possible here, right? It's difficult for an SME owner or business owner to say, great, I want to contribute to these sustainability goals, and I'm on the sort of path towards what this means for our country or our nation in terms of what we're striving for. What does that mean for my bottom line? What is the incentive from a business perspective as how one might stay in this work? Oftentimes we think about training programs and they'll use as their metric the number of folks served. Well, number of folks served doesn't actually help me understand what is the impact in my business. And so I would take the point that Meena offered a step further to say, what are those interim metrics along the way where you can actually see demonstrated business value? And to what extent are we actually intentionally studying that impact between what's happening in the training provider or whatever's in the ecosystem to what is the actual impact inside of my firm? So often we talk about the skills work as though just getting the skill is the barrier to this growth. What I heard and what Meena spoke to are actually many other systemic barriers that often prevent folks from accessing these opportunities. Perhaps there's not actually the space that's the equivalent of a chamber of commerce where businesses are actually come together, understand how they drive collective investment towards some of these skills challenges as opposed to individual operators, right? Perhaps there are not some of the trainings that actually or connections that make these metrics clear inside of the business of what are we actually going towards. And so I would encourage folks to think about those types of incentives. If you want to get more SMEs and SMEs into this conversation, then we have to meet folks where they are. helping to understand what is the benefit for them, not just for their workers, but what is the intended benefit and how do we demonstrate that impact on our business. If we can see that, that can contribute so much more to the scale up. To give a concrete example from a different context, FSG India has been running the GLOW program, Growing Livelihoods and Opportunities for Women, for multiple years. Through that work, what we came to understand is actually, if we can demonstrate the impact of hiring and retaining women, what happens for your bottom line, the reduced hiring costs, the increased productivity, if we demonstrate that in a single shop owner or a single business in the logistics industry, more folks are going to want to get in and move that work forward. That if we can do that sort of piloting and demonstrate the actual business impact, you actually are able to build some of that incentive that you want to engage in this work, not because it's the right thing to do, or not because of the moral imperative, and perhaps not only because your clients are asking for it, but actually you see what the benefit would be towards your business in the immediate term and what that opportunity is. If we can do that sort of analysis and connect both what we're trying to do for workers down to the bottom line for businesses and how they can sustain that work, and then tell that story really effectively, I would argue that might be one of the most effective incentives to bring more small businesses into this conversation.
Thank you so much, John, and thanks you once again to all of our panelists. Given that we are already over time, we'll leave it here and back to you, Steffi, for closing. Thanks.
Thank you very much to all our speakers for generously making time for this event in the middle of a very busy week in New York. And thank you especially very sincerely to all our participants for their patience at the beginning of the event. It really means a lot to us that you joined us. We will be putting on YouTube the recording of this panel discussion, as well as the film festival segment that we shared in the beginning. We look forward to being in touch and to following up on the wonderful recommendations that have come out, particularly to keep this community going and to build on this ecosystem. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.